Hey everyone, and welcome back to Frontend Expert. In this video, we'll be discussing CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. CSS has two primary purposes. First, it allows us to style our websites by adding colors, fonts, and much more that we'll see throughout the crash course. Moreover, it allows us to describe the layout of how we want our website to be presented, such as the size and positioning of elements. A style sheet is simply a document that does just that. It allows us to describe the style and layout of a website. And the cascading portion of the name refers to the order of which the browser decides between various style sheets. Specifically, there are three main types of style sheets. First, the user agent style sheet defines the browser defaults. For example, this contains the default font sizes for the different heading levels. Next, the user style sheet contains any of the user's saved preferences in the browser. These override the user agent style sheet. Finally, the author style sheet contains the CSS that the author of the website writes. So these will be what we are primarily writing, and they take precedence over all of the other style sheets. However, it is worth noting that other style sheets can still take precedence if they use the important rule, which we will see later in the crash course. That said, we can usually assume that our styles will have the highest level of precedence. CSS is simply a collection of declarations, which are just property value pairs describing the styles of our website. Occasionally, you will also hear declarations referred to as individual rules. The syntax of a declaration is extremely simple. First, we write the property name, followed by a colon, and then the value. Finally, lines end with semicolons. For example, to change the font color to red, we would just use the color property, followed by a colon, then the word red, and a semicolon. Next, we need a way to tell CSS what elements we want to style, and we do that by including our declaration in what we call a rule set. Rule sets have two primary components, the selector and the declaration block. The selector determines which elements should be affected by this rule set. For example, here we are selecting all H1 and paragraph tags. We will see in a future crash course video more about the options we have here for selectors. Then inside the curly braces is the declaration block. And this is simply a collection of these declarations that we have already seen. It's worth noting that the last declaration technically does not need a semicolon, but it's always advised to include it. Next, we might want to include comments in our CSS, just like any other language. And comments have a very simple syntax. First, a forward slash, followed by the asterisk character, and then the actual contents of the comment, and then the comment is ended with another asterisk character and a forward slash. Comments can be one or multiple lines, but they always use this same syntax regardless of how long they are. And finally, we need to actually link our CSS back to the HTML files we write. The way we do this is through the link tag, which goes in the head since it does not affect the actual markup of the page. This takes two primary attributes. First, the rel or relationship attribute. This says what the relationship of the linked document is to the HTML, and in this case, we want style sheet. Next is the href or hypertext reference, and this works just like other HTML href attributes that we have seen. It is the path to the CSS file, either relative or absolute. It is pretty common to call this file something like styles.css, but the name is really up to you. And that's really all there is to the core of CSS. It's quite a simple language. So now let's move over to the code editor and do a quick demo. Now we are here in the code editor, so let's go ahead and write some CSS for this basic website. All it does is it says hello world and then H1, and then it has a paragraph that says I am a paragraph. The first thing we need to do is actually link the CSS file. So we'll do this at the bottom of the head. We'll add a link tag, and the link tag will take two primary attributes, rel for the relationship, and this will be style sheet. And then we need an href to actually link back to the file, and this will be styles.css. And this is a self-closing tag. Save that, and now we can go into our styles.css file and start writing some CSS. So first we need a selector, so let's select the H1 for now, and we can write some styles for the H1. So we'll open up a rule set and we can add some declarations. The first thing I notice here is that my text is all off to the left and I might want to center it. And the way we can center text is with the text align property, and we'll set that to be center. Save that, and we'll see we have our first CSS declaration working. It is centering the text hello world. But I also might want to change its color. The black text is a little bit boring, so maybe let's say color, which sets the font color. And let's make this a dark blue. Save that, and you can see now we have dark blue text. There are lots of different colors we can use here by name, as well as you can enter colors in a few different formats, and we'll see all of that in the video on units, but for now, we'll just put dark blue. Additionally, maybe I don't want this font to be quite so bold, so the way we can change that is do font weight, which defaults to bold for a heading, but maybe I want to make this normal instead, so now it's no longer bold, but this doesn't feel quite as important as I want it to be, so let's also underline it. The way we can underline is using text decoration, and we can set this one equal to underline. Save that, and now we have our heading is dark blue, it is a normal font weight rather than being bold, and it is underlined in the center of the page. So now let's make some changes to the paragraph as well. So we can just add another rule set down below this one. The convention is usually to add one blank line between each rule set, and then we can make some changes to the paragraph. Maybe first I want to add a background color to it. So let's say background color, and we can make this the same dark blue that we used above. And now the paragraph has this dark blue background. But accessibility wise, this is obviously a problem. I can barely even read the paragraph now. So let's change the font color of this one as well and maybe make it white. So usually when we have a dark background, you want to use white font or a very light colored font. Next, let's add a height. So we can say height and then we can set it to some value, maybe 100 pixels. And this will just make the entire thing bigger. There are other options for how we can set height. There's a bunch of different units, and we will see those as well in the future Crash Course videos, but for now, we'll just go with 100 pixels. But we might actually want to change this away from a height into what we call min height. And min height will do the same thing in this instance, but it's a little bit more accessible. The reason being it doesn't set the exact height, it just sets a minimum. So in the case the user was using a larger default font size than we were when we were building the website, this min height will allow that paragraph to still get taller than the 100 pixels if theirs needs to stretch even bigger. And on the note of font size, we can change that as well, and we can use the font size property for this, and we can set it equal to some value. There are a bunch of different units that we can use for this. The one I prefer to use most of the time is REM, so I'll set it to 1.25 REM, which is the root EM unit. Essentially what this will do is it will set it to 1.25 times the size of the root element's font, which the root element is the HTML tag. And by default, this will be 16 pixels in most browsers, but this allows users to change it, and our font size will scale with how they changed their defaults, as opposed to if we just used a pixel value here, we would be setting it to a pixel value that cannot change no matter what the user has done in their defaults. So I think this is usually a little bit better is to use REM. And then maybe we also want to change the width of this. So we could say width, and let's just make it 30%. So this will do 30% of the size of its parent, which in this case happens to be the body. So it is 30% the size of the entire page. Now, of course, we will continue to see more properties, values, and selectors throughout the entirety of the CSS Crash Course, as well as Front-End Expert as a whole. But for now, this will end this video on the basics of CSS. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.